Hi. So, I was going to read this story to my class, and we just ran out of time. So, I found this older, camcorder. I figured I'll just read it here, and I can share it. It's just a little story. Well, not little. It's a little bit long. That's a story that I wrote about a year or 2 years ago now, and it's just a spooky story for the spooky season. So I wanted to share it and see what you guys thought. Alright. Called No Good Deed. The crisp spring air hadn't yet shaken the chill of winter. Phil stepped outside and locked his back door. He then hid his spare key in the garden, where he always does, and habitually looked around to see if anyone was watching him. He was always worried someone may see where he hides his spare and come rob him of everything while he's on his morning run or at the store. Too many true crime shows or thrillers, probably. Phil walked to the front of the house, past his flower bed and through the side gate, carefully locking it behind him. As he walked, he lengthened his gait and stretched his tired body. Phil's body was lean from years of running and cardio workouts. He wasn't a super athlete by any means, but he maintained a 6-minute mile. In fact, he was proud of as he neared the dreaded 30s. He breathed deeply and used his car to balance. The reflection in the window revealed messy, fiery red hair. Phil had bags under his eyes from a late night working. When he was younger, he thought being editor would save him from the majority of the work in the writing world. An idiot. Phil pushed off the car and started a slow jog off his driveway and down the sidewalk on his usual route. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and most people were still asleep. He enjoyed the quiet, chill atmosphere of his neighborhood. When he lived in the city, his apartment seemed to attract and amplify every sound, day and night. He didn't hate it per se, but he's glad to have aged out of that lifestyle. Plus, he felt much more comfortable going for a run in the suburbs. As he rounded a corner and began crossing the street, Phil heard a honk and stopped suddenly as a large Jeep blew the stop sign. What a jerk, Phil said internally. He watched the Jeep for a minute before he rounded the next corner and headed toward downtown, probably heading to a shopping center right when they opened. Phil shook his head and cursed at himself for being careless and continued on. Oh, come on, man. This was really his one peaceful moment of the day. Even on the weekend, he could expect a mountain of emails to dig through and at least a dozen phone calls. Not that he could really complain. It's better than not working at all. Sarian, Phil's next-door neighbor, just got laid off the week before. Thankfully, they'd been lucky enough to save some money up, so he expected they'd be fine for a while as he looked for a new job. Just a reminder to Phil that his life could be a lot worse. Kind of foggy today, Phil muttered under his breath as he began to pick up his pace. The sky seemed to have fallen on the ground in the last 10 or so minutes, and Phil could barely see a block ahead. It was kind of nice, though. The fog seemed to dampen any morning noises from the nearby houses, and there was something thrilling about running through the mist. After about 20 minutes, Phil slowed his pace to a walk. He needed a rest before he turned around to head home. He took a look around and realized he must have made a wrong turn at some point. The houses around him were unfamiliar, and he couldn't make out the best way to go back home without simply following his path backwards. He took this as an opportunity to rest a bit longer and continued walking, checking out the area. The houses were older, Victorian-era homes, and those had a large front porch, multiple stories, and were highly decorated. The vibrant colors of the homes had faded over the years, and the metal fences that surround the yards were rusted in many areas. One house in particular caught his eye, a 3-story home with several multi-pane windows and a large round turret on the right side of the home. The paint was peeling off of it in several areas and seemed to sag into the ground, weary with the years. The windows peered down on him in an oppressive way that made him feel small. The fence that surrounded the yard was wrought iron, and the rusty gate was hanging open and crooked on its hinges. A single metal chain was wrapped around the edge of the gate, but the lock was long since missing. Phil watched the house for a moment, but its dark, watchful windows made him uneasy. He turned to start home when he heard a soft whimpering from behind the gate. A dark... Probably some kids playing outside. Anyway, a dark green bush hid most of her, but Phil could make out the form of a young girl curled up on the ground just inside the gate. Phil turned around and started up the few stone steps to the yawning gate, and pushing the rusty thing out of the way, spoke softly. "Hey, are you okay?" The young girl was startled and hopped further behind the bush. Who are you?" No one, really. I was just walking by and heard you crying. Do you need help?" She crawled back inside and looked around the bush at Phil. A small round face looked back at Phil with bright emerald eyes. A tangled mess of shoulder-length raven black hair framed the pale face. She nodded pitifully, and tears welled up in the corner of her eyes. Phil crouched down and walked past the gate to get a better look at her. She was dressed in a simple blue dress with white trim that went down to her ankles. She was wearing dirty black, unlaced boots. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "I got scared and left." The tears started streaming down her face, and she sniffed. "I didn't mean to. I just got scared." Phil hesitantly reached out and patted her shoulder. He was never great with kids and wasn't sure the best way to comfort her. It felt more like a guy patting his friend on the back. Just awkward. She continued, "My brother's inside. I was supposed to watch him. I don't want to go back alone, though." Phil looked up at the house and noticed the front door was open. Despite the decrepit nature of the outside, the inside was actually well furnished, brightly lit, and looked inviting. "Are your parents home?" She nodded again. "They're down in the basement. Daddy said to stay with William upstairs, but then I heard scary sounds coming from the basement. I need to watch William, but I'm just too scared." Phil scratched his neck anxiously. Is the dad hurting the mom? Should I call the cops? Not that I even have a phone to do it, but maybe a neighbor does. I guess I could just yell inside and see if anyone answers. Dang it. At the very least, I can't leave her here alone. How about we check on William together, okay? He said with a reassuring smile that he didn't feel himself. The little girl nodded vigorously and stood up, wiping her dress off. Phil looked around at the neighbor houses to see if there was anyone he could wave down for help. To his dismay, the fog had gotten up even thicker, and the nearby houses were covered in a thick blanket of mist. He offered a hand to the girl, which she grabbed tightly. She used her other hand to wipe away her tears and snot. Phil made a mental note not to grab that hand. They started walking up the short path to the front door, hand in hand. The house loomed over them, and the large entrance to the house seemed poised to swallow them whole. A sudden crash of metal on metal made them both jump. Almost fell on my chair. Readjust. And Phil whipped his eyes backward to see that the gate had been caught by the wind and slammed into the fence. The gate vibrated from the impact, and the chain shook. The small hand of the little girl slipped from Phil as she shrieked. That was weird. place is kind of a mess. It's probably just I just put something, leaned something over, and then it just kind of fell over eventually. Squeaky. Anyway. Where was I? A sudden crash of metal on metal made them both jump, and Phil whipped his eyes backward to see that the gate had been caught by the wind and slammed into the fence. The gate vibrated from the impact, and the chain shook. The small hand of the little girl slipped from Phil as she shrieked and ran into the house. Wait, hang on! But it's too late. The girl was out of sight in her panic, and Phil stood in the entrance alone once again. Phil called out, "Hello? Anyone else home?" The girl was out of sight in her panic, and Phil stood in the entrance alone once again. Phil called out, "Hello? Anyone else home? I just found your daughter outside. I just want to make sure everyone's okay." The fog seemed to drown out all sounds, and Phil was met with ghost silence. Well, she's inside now, so guess I'll be going then. He hovered to see if anyone would respond, but still the house seemed to hold its breath. Like the tearing of fabric, a sharp noise ripped through the silence. From deep in the house, a guttural growl echoed, followed by the whimpers of a little girl. What the heck? Phil staggers backward, clutching the door frame as he does so. Little girl? Hey, come back out now, okay? Phil's voice uncontrollably quakes. There was something truly unnatural about that growl. It was almost bestial, but also more... Phil decides not to think about it anymore. Oh, crap. What was that? Where'd that girl run off to? Dang it, darn it. Resolving himself to his fate, Phil walks into the house cautiously. He gives one last glance outside and notices the fog had grown oppressively thick. It seems like it is determined to choke out any sound or sight of the other houses or any potential help. Despite this, Phil yells weakly into the mist. Hello? Please? Can anyone help? There's some sort of animal in this house. Phil waits, his heart thundering for several beats. The girl continues to whimper inside. Darn it. Phil turns back toward the hungering interior of the house, tossing a searching glance around the first room. Compared to the outside of the house, the interior is comfortable and thoroughly clean. The hallway opens into a sitting room with some armchairs and a small couch angled to face the large fireplace on the far wall. The armchairs look deep and plush enough to sink into and escape all the troubles currently plaguing Phil. If only. Oddly, it looks like the hall and sitting room are both illuminated by gas lamps, which cast flickering shadows in the deep corners of the room. Considering his current predicament, Phil finds it quite unsettling. Hey, little girl. Hey, little girl. Please come back out to me. I'll find your brother, okay? Let's just get you outside. Phil's voice wavers, betraying his faux courage. He listens intently and hears the girl continuing to whimper. Sounds like it's coming from upstairs, which Phil finds to be a relief, further away from the source of the horrendous growling. He walks further down the hall and sees a larger hall that leads to several other rooms and an elegant wooden staircase, which heads upward before curving back on itself in a tight turn. The darkened wooden head of the handrail had been carved into an effigy of a raven's head. The beak is open in a permanent cry. Phil grasps the handrail and slowly starts up the stairs. As he comes around the tight turn in the stairs, the next floor begins to materialize into view. Oh, I need some, mood lighting. Let me put this candle closer. I'm gonna go turn the light off. Spooky. Spooky. Now, if I can read it still, we'll see. Let's see how it goes. All right. Let's keep reading, shall we? Alright, where is it? Oh, here we are. Phil is startled by a towering figure in the dimly lit hall, but realizes it's just a suit of armor, propped against the wall on a stand. Who in the world has a suit of armor in their house? Phil breathes a sigh of relief and begins to fumble for a light switch before remembering the gas lamps downstairs. He holds down the button on his watch and a faint green light emits from it, which he uses to stumble through the dark hall. Across the hall, he sees a nearly imperceptible flickering of an open flame. He walked over and finds a dial on the side and turns it to increase the gas flow. It's just a little bit. Struggling with focus. Okay, there we go. The hallway brightens, and Phil gets a full view of the room, his heart pounding with anxiety at being trapped in the dark. This hall was mostly bare, save the alarming armor and a small chest at the end of the hall. There was another set of stairs going to the third floor. Phil looks closer at the armor now and chuckles to himself at his own fear. Well, you're not that scary now, are you? Still strange, though. He reaches out and opens the face visor. The inside is pitched in inky darkness. Phil curiously leans in to see inside. The armor instantly lurches forward and grasps at Phil. The helmet comes down on the space between Phil's neck and shoulder. The visor bites into his flesh, pinching it enough to cause it to bleed. The thick metal arms clasp around Phil's back, and the legs step forward, forcing Phil to trip and fall backward. Holy night, man. That's what I get for having all my craft stuff all over the place. A bunch of noises. Alright, there's just some paper slipping, I think. Alright, let's keep going. Oh, right. Oh! Right. The visor bites into his flesh, pinching it enough to cause it to bleed. The thick metal arms clasp around Phil's back, and the legs step forward, forcing Phil to trip and fall backward. Phil pushes the armor away and crawls back as quickly as he can, panting loudly in his panic. Phil raises a foot to kick the armor away as the armor falls to the ground in front of him, unmoving. Phil scrambles back to his feet, using the wall behind him, watching the armor warily. After a few moments, it continues to lay motionless on the floor. Phil runs forward and kicks the helmet down the stairs, then waits again for any movement. When the armor continues to lay lifeless on the ground, Phil slides down the wall and tries to catch his breath. Oh, crap, I'm losing my mind in here. Ugh. Looking at the stand, he sees that it was rotten nearly all the way through. It was a miracle the armor hadn't fallen apart sooner. Just a suit of armor. It's just a suit of armor. Groaning, Phil stands once more and rubs the spot on his neck that had been painfully pinched. Pulling his hand away, he sees it as bleeding, but not enough to worry about at the moment. Little girl, please come out. I'm tripping all over in this place, and we need to get you and your brother somewhere else. Somewhere safe. Phil waits quietly for an answer. The whimpering had stopped sometime during his destruction of the armor. Hopefully he doesn't have to pay for that. I'm in here, came a timid response from one of the rooms to the left of the landing. The second response came, the crying of a baby, presumably William. I'm coming, sweetie. Just hang on. Phil steps gingerly over the fallen armor and grabs the cold handle of the door. With a turn and a gentle push, Phil enters the room beyond. It's dark in the room, the only light coming from the hallway. Phil sees it as a bedroom, or maybe a guest room. A large bed takes up much of the room, and a dresser is just to his left. At the far corner, there is a door that appears to lead out onto a balcony, and to Phil's right is another door that is closed. The baby's wail continues to ring, coming from the closed door. Phil opens the door and walks into an almost pitch-black room. He doesn't see the girl in this room, but immediately sees the crib standing alone in the center of the room. The walls are bare and no other furniture can be seen. Still, William continues to cry, desperate for someone to answer. Phil rushes to the crib side and sees a lump of a baby lying under a blanket. Carefully grabs the blanket and tosses it aside. Phil couldn't describe what he saw, nor would he want to. He instinctively threw up at the repulsive sight, only barely turning away from the crib before doing so. The wailing had stopped the moment he had thrown aside the blanket, but it was clear now that it could not have been William crying. William, or whoever this had been, was very clearly long deceased. After emptying his already empty stomach, Phil backs up, and tears begin to fall down his face. What's happening? Why? And the question echoes around the room unanswered. Wiping the tears and vomit from his face, Phil looks to the crib, but rips his eyes away before he thinks too long about what was inside. Little girl? Please, we need to leave. Phil clumsily stands up and shuffles into the other room. He casts his eyes into the dim room and searches desperately for the little girl. As his eyes glance over the bed, he witnessed a horrific change. The dust that coated the bed began to rise into the air. Frozen to the spot, Phil watches as the dust begins to coalesce to the form of a woman. Cold floods into the room and Phil shivers. The stench of decay creeps into each breath Phil draws, and he feels another round of vomit begin to force its way upwards. He uses what strength he has to hold the throat back and begins to slink toward the hall door. The spirit, for its nature is a secret no more, turns to follow Phil's movements as the dust continues to form a clear shape. Long hair flows over shriveled, emaciated shoulders. Skeletal face hides dull eyes in deep sockets. As Phil nears the door, the spirit flings itself through the air toward him, and a baleful wail splits his ears. Oh man, it's getting really crazy. What the heck? What is that? Earth Squiggle! Whoa. I'm not sure where I am. It's like a big white box. I don't know when I fell. Just a box. I'm gonna turn this off for a bit. Save the battery. Noises outside on the walls. I don't know what they want. This camera's kind of my only light, so I've been turning it off and on. It's probably been a few hours now. And my story. Save the battery for a little bit longer. Just sit in the dark. I must have fallen asleep at some point. Noises wouldn't stop all night or day. Whatever it is. hear things. You people. I think I'm gonna keep reading my story. If I don't go, I want to read to my kids one more time, so. I love you, Lily. Delilah, like. I won't be okay. I won't be okay. See, they agree. Hear 'em. I think they're saying I'm gonna be okay. It's a bit hard to read now, but I'll do my best. Phil falls backward and closes his eyes, waiting for whatever fate may befall him. Phil falls hard onto the rough wooden floor of the hallway, banging his elbow badly and knocking the back of his head on the worn wood. With bleary eyes, he looks at the open doorway of the bedroom, searching for the spirit he was certain was ready to drain away what life he still had left. He sees her hovering in the doorway, clawing at some unseen barrier, seemingly desperate to reach him. Phil sits frozen for many heartbeats before throwing himself on his feet and stumbling backward, away from the momentarily stalled ghost. So transfixed is his gaze that he had completely forgotten about the suit of armor on the ground. That is, until he is well past where it should be lying in the hallway. Realizing the armor is missing, Phil pulls his eyes away from the struggling spirit to look for the disturbingly absent armor. The clanking of metal on the stairs between him and the exit reveals where it has gotten away to. Armor is whole now, holding the previously discarded helmet in one arm and dragging a dimly shining sword in the other. It is shambling up the stairs toward him. Phil looks down the stairs to his freedom, just past the armed guard. I'm sorry, armed armor. Then back at the silently screeching spirit, which is hovering just inside the doorway, watching him intently. The sunken sockets have two dim glints of life on life. Phil makes an unhappy decision to ascend to the next flight of stairs. Maybe there is a way to get out from there. There should be another window I can climb out of. Phil is quite certain the girl was yet another apparition, and gives up hope of saving her. He runs up the stairs, coming on yet another pitch-black hallway. That deep darkness threatened to swallow all he was, and even the thought of him, and for a moment he quailed in anguish. The clinking of metal on metal, the scrape of steel on wood. He flings himself into that endless black, with only the faint glow of his watch to guide him. Phil finds yet another barely burning lamp, which he quickly spins to brighten. The hallway here is less adorned than the one below. I guess they don't like me stopping. I just really like the story. Okay. Then we keep going. Phil makes an unhappy decision to ascend to the next flight of stairs. I already said that. Phil finds yet another barely burning lamp, which he quickly spins to brighten. The hallway here is less adorned than the one below. There are 3 doors here, one that immediately appears to be a closet, and one on the other side of a narrow hallway. The door to his right hangs open limply on the hinges, like a crooked mouth stretched in an odd grin. Phil runs to the other one. He flings this door open and finds himself in a grand bedroom. The dusty air chokes him, and his coughs echo around the room. The hall behind him has grown deathly quiet. Apparently too quiet. He glances back only briefly before throwing himself toward a glass door leading to a balcony, sparing not even a glance toward the rest of the room. He pulls open the door and steps out onto the balcony. The air presses in, a deathly cold wraps him in a freezing embrace. The mists have grown so thick that Phil struggles to find the railing of the balcony only feet away from him. He grasps the frigid iron and peers over the edge. Empty, gray void stares back at him. Nothing can be seen of the ground below. The balcony hangs over the house a couple of feet, making it nearly impossible to find a foothold past the railing. Still, silence behind him. Phil slowly turns to the room, expecting a specter to be waiting for him. Instead, he sees the room is still empty. Iron railing groans under his weight, loose in the nearby wall. Phil wrenches on the bar, freeing it from the setting with surprising ease. He gingerly slides it out of the post's bracket. The iron bar bites at his fingers with a chill that leaks the strength from his hand. His grip doesn't lessen in the slightest, taking solace in the small protection the weapon offers him. I'll not die in this house. I'll not die in this house, and I'm not throwing myself to my death off this balcony just to the evil of this place. Phil thinks angrily. He slowly, carefully steps back into the room. Silence thunders in his ears. Nothing moves, and only the faint glow from the hallway illuminates the dark, gray room. The oppressive mists were flooding into the room behind him, moving almost with a will of their own. Phil closes the glass door and watches with worry as the mists press against the glass like seeking fingers looking for entrance. Phil ponders his options. Maybe I can jump from the second floor without killing myself, as long as I don't fall on the spikes of that fence. He shakes his head at the thought. He doesn't like that option much better than facing the sword of that armor. It's better, just not much. One step forward, followed by a second. The iron bar cuts into his fingers uncomfortably, and the cold seems to only worsen in the house. Fine. I'll fight my way past that armor and jump from the window. He doesn't get the chance to test the bravery he fought so bitterly to muster. I'm gonna take a break and see if my friends come back. It's been a while, and still nothing new. So let's finish our story. He doesn't get the chance to test the bravery he fought so bitterly to muster. Without warning, the floor opens cavernously beneath his feet. Wood cracks and twists like a great mouth that greedily consumes Phil. With a shout, Phil falls into the void, passing through the specter's room below and once more through the main floor. Down he falls with much too much time to consider his impending crunch in the basement below. Yet he continues to fall. Only when Phil bitterly accepts he must have already died, and his soul was simply falling to whatever his destined afterlife must be, he smacks into a hard stone floor with a painful crack. The air is forced from his lungs, and he releases a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. Phil rolls over, nursing his back and trying to catch his breath. All things considered, he should be dead, but he won't argue with it. He blindly feels around for the iron bar and finds it, holding it close in front of him like a shield against the darkness. At that moment, Phil was blinded by a sudden light in the room. He swings the bar in front of him in a panic, blinking rapidly, trying to regain his vision. Show you guys this. At least these guys have a sense of humor. But you know what? Gives me a bit of light I hadn't had before. So, let's at least use it. He tries to regain his vision. The bright light. It's funny. He finds himself in a low-ceilinged stone room. It looks like a picture straight out of a medieval castle. A dungeon. Looking upward, there is no sign of the hole that dropped into the room. The room is bare except for a single torch that burns hot and bright, the source of the blinding light. Just past the torch is a narrow hallway that leads to who knows where. Nowhere good. Phil knows. He knows it's nowhere good. He sits then, leaning against the wall, and there, Phil weeps in the silence. His tears fall hot and fast, streaming down his face like they had not for many years. Why? Why, he curses, did the still air, the cramped room, provides no response? Hi. It's good to hear from you again. I thought of a poem. Do you want to hear it? Relax. Give me a second to gather my thoughts. Okay. I won't think then. Spring comes and the flowers bloom, birds sing in the afternoon. The warmth of summer is nearby. Around the corner the days fly by. Summer blues, days grow long. The sun is warm and all is well. Winds of autumn join the song. The passion of summer bids farewell. That's not done, relax. Fall brings loss and yet still hope. The trees grow bare and life stalls. Fall moves on, winter will ope. Hope grows bare, the last leaf falls. Winter comes quickly, the earth looks sickly. Will life move on? Will I? almost done with the story. When the tears stopped falling, Phil breathed deeply. Nothing had come from the hallway. The torches continued to burn just as fiercely as before. Phil doesn't know how long he had been sitting there, but it felt like ages. He hadn't moved until he was certain the worst of his terror had left him. He finds he can control his limbs again, and so he stands up. Going to make me walk to my end, then? Can't even bring it to me. His calls down the hallway echo through the silence. Phil peers down the narrow hallway, lit on one side by torches that continue into the distance. Phil carefully picks up the iron bar, the eerily cold metal feeling oddly familiar now. Then Phil staunchly strides toward his end. The torches bring warmth to the long path, which Phil welcomes. Soon, though, the underground path becomes oppressively hot, and the air is thick with humidity. I'm going to be boiled alive before I even reach the end. Phil despairs. After some time, Phil sees the path widens and opens into a large room. As soon as the room is in sight, the awful stench of decay and rot reaches him. It is enough to make Phil gag. Something has died here. Or many somethings. Steeling himself, Phil stalks in, eyeing for any danger. It is an immensely large room, and the ceiling seems to hang 30 feet above, with no visible supports to hold up the stone. The ceiling is mostly flat, but a dome is centered just above the middle of the room. And it curves upward out of sight from where Phil stands. A few dozen yards away, a black marble staircase leads to a platform made of the same dark stone. The rest of the room is full of a dark pool of stagnant, turbid water. A narrow gray stone walkway leads over the pool to the staircase in the center of the room. The stench is eye-watering, and the room itself. Phil sees something glinting at the edge of a smooth, white marble table. The smooth white marble table stands solitarily on the platform. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he sneaks down the walkway. As he passes the halfway mark, his eyes float upwards, and he sees the dome is adorned with an emerald mosaic that stretches round the bottom. It frames a much darker image that crawls towards the center of the dome. It's made of dark purple tiles so dark black it seems to absorb the ambient light of the room. The mosaic depicts a shadow. The shadow has no distinct form, but it reminds Phil of every dark dream and nightmare of his life, warped into a single image. Like the visage of a demon that paralyzes you in your sleep and watches you with empty, cruel eyes. From the very air around Phil, a voice reverberates. I have been waiting for you. It shakes Phil to his core, and his bones shiver in response. Phil whirls the iron bar around, looking for the source of the voice. The room is deathly still.
He gives a quick, furtive glance at the shadow mosaic watching from above, but it is unchanged. "Who are you?" Phil says with a quiver in his voice. "My name has been lost by all but myself. It means nothing to you. Consider me simply inevitability." The thick, raspy voice shakes the air with its presence. "What do you want with me?" Phil asks, as he moves toward the platform. Upon the platform is a knife. It is a beautiful piece with a slightly curved blade. The guard is a simple steel, but the hilt is leather-bound with softly glinting sapphires twisted into it as a natural grip. Silver filigree climbs up the back of the dagger, wrapping back into the simple steel guard. The blade of the dagger is etched with strange symbols that Phil doesn't recognize. The symbols are very fluid and slightly slanted. Despite its beauty, the dagger worries Phil. He ignores it and continues to hold his makeshift weapon desperately. "I want to make you a proposition. That is all." Phil, confused and more than a little distrustful, replies, "All of this just to offer me a deal? Doubt it." "This is a deal I cannot afford for you to ignore. So forgive the methods used to bring you to me." The whisperer was still unseen, but his voice demands such command and attention that Phil is frozen to the spot. "What do you want?" "I will take your body, and through your physical form, I will return to my world. When I am through with your body, I will return you to your home." A shiver runs down Phil's back, and he shudders. Whatever this creature was, he did not want it inside him. Thought is revolting and terrifying. "And if I refuse?" "I will kill you and consume your soul." Words hang in the air for several beats as Phil absorbs them. His voice quakes as he speaks. "I guess I don't really have a choice then, do I?" "That is where you are wrong, Phil Silverman. We always have a choice. Your choices are just not to your liking, but it is still your choice to make." Phil's shoulders slump at this. He tosses aside the iron bar and it clatters down the marble stairs, landing in the dark pool of water. It disturbs the surface, and he sees a dark shape move through the disruption, hidden by the murky water. He shudders again. Why me? Why anyone? You are not the first this offer has been extended to. None so far have taken my bargain. Cowards, or brave men and women, I will let you decide. Do you accept my bargain? Tears came readily to Phil. He nods glumly, but speaks in the silence when the entity doesn't. I accept your bargain. If you will return me home when you are done, you may have me. Then take the blade in your hand and lay it upon the altar. Phil slowly does as he is told, taking the beautiful dagger in his hand and lying upon the altar. The dagger is comfortable in his hand and warm, like it has been lying in the afternoon sun for hours. The leather fits in his hand easily. The emeralds are smooth and have a stark, cool contrast to the warm leather, though it's a pleasant feeling. Phil can't help but be repulsed by the stark, almost taunting contrast to his current situation. Now what do I do? He questions the entity, pain in his voice. Stab yourself in the heart. Phil is stunned at this and sits up abruptly. He expected, well, he wasn't sure what he expected, honestly. Not this, though. So you spare me? Only have me kill myself? I will repair your body once I have entered it. It will only hurt, and only for a moment. The voice was cold, unfeeling, cruel. Phil shakes his head in disbelief. You lie! You only want to see me suffer even more. The tears come once again unbidden. I have no reason to lie. You have no escape and no power to destroy my form. Even in its weakened state, even in this alien world of yours, I have power enough to destroy you beyond recognition. Cruel. To do the dirty deed yourself. Phil's anger overwhelms his despair. Why do these spirits want to see me tortured? What have I done to deserve this? You deserve nothing. You simply came to the wrong house at the wrong time. This world's destiny is long since dead. The entity pauses briefly to let the thoughts sink into Phil, then continues. I cannot do this. Only a willing soul can lend me their form. In this, I am powerless. You must make your choice. Phil lays back down. He reflects on his day. This morning he was plagued by worries of deadlines and whether he had time to do his run to his heart's content. Life is awful. This is awful. The entity did not respond to this. He grasps the knife once again, tightly. He raises it above his chest, the tip pointing directly at its target. He doesn't move. He's frozen by fear. It appears in your indecision you have indeed made a choice. Another has chosen to die. Wait! Just be patient. Have you ever had to kill yourself before? Phil spits into the void. Yes! Phil decides he didn't really care, but the answer was unsatisfying nonetheless. The dagger quivered in his grip. I will not die here. I won't. Phil yells to the entity, to himself, to the world itself. And then the dagger found its mark. Well, at least we got to finish our story, huh? Voices have been quiet for a while. And sounds pretty much stopped. Whoever's watching this, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. And I won't take any other options. And you know what? You're gonna be okay too. We're not characters in a story. We're real, breathing people. Our choices are ours, no one else's. There's no great author writing down our story for us. We have to write our own stories. One day, and one decision at a time. And I decide I'm gonna be okay. You need to decide that you're gonna be okay too. I'm not a character. I'm a person. Someone that has people that loves them and cares for them. And you know what? If you don't, I'll be that person. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're gonna be okay. Light. Light.